If you engage her dance willingly, Cancer will digest your bullshit. She will lead you to the greatest ecstasy and ecstasy. She invites you to return to your primal self. Her teaching is primal medicine. You can love her for her power of transformation, or you can hate her, fight her, fear her, struggle against her. Either way, she might kill you.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Inventor and author of Primal Habits, Uninflamed, Master of You, and Body Thrive, and soon to be released, The Witch's Cancer Journal.
A weaver of words and ancient worlds into the future.
Plumbing for depth in the playground of your continual reinvention.
A wisdom witch, a Gayana Yogini.
And now the moment we've been waiting for is here.
Ringleader of Club Thrive and Wellness Pro Academy.
A freedom warrior, earth mother, proud mama, devoted wife.
Not your grandmother's Ayurveda.
Futurist. Biohacker. Guru and goofball.
Where truth and freedom prevail.
Evolving the ancient into the future.
Welcome to the Thrive with Cate Stillman podcast. Made for you by us.
Good to see you guys. All right. I would love to know in the chat what brought you here today. That's what I would really love to know in the chat. Because I don't have much of a plan. I promised I'd do a little bit of reading, which I've never done before. So a little bit, I feel not nervous, but just like, I usually do information overload, right? So I usually like give people just a ton of information, whether it's about microbiome diet or intermittent fasting or whatever. And this is not that. Like, this book is not that. This process is not that. But it definitely is, like we said in the book, you can get like the TMI, the too much information, the raw experiential memoir-esque experience. And so I just wanted to make some time to show up. I have led the community at Yoga Healer and Club Thrive and Yoga Health Coaching and Wellness Pro Academy. I've been a online community leader for decades. It's a long time. And this process of having a scary diagnosis, I knew I had Lynch syndrome since I was about my early 30s. And so I always knew that I had a really, really, really high risk of cancer. And all my relatives that were tested, like, we know who has Lynch and who doesn't. And it's like, it's kind of black and white. So I knew that. But I also, those of you who know me know, like, I've been an Ayurvedic medicine practitioner and a serious yoga practitioner and meditator. And I've led detoxes since 2002. And I honestly thought that, with cancer and with diet and lifestyle, that like, I wasn't going to be the one. It wasn't. And the more you read the research on it, it's like I just didn't have the risk factors except for the genetic condition, right? So I was more surprised than anyone. And then I didn't really know how to navigate that as a community leader in wellness, right? As like someone who's first of all supposed to be the source of strength in the community. And so this was really hard for me. Like, obviously, like, the cancer's hard for anybody, but like adding no walk in the park there. But then adding that kind of on top of it, of like, how do I navigate this, and who's done this well? And then I had a lot of examples of things that I didn't like what I saw of how there's different yoga teachers that I've seen go through cancer or whatnot, and I just realized I had to find my own way. So part of the reason I wanted to do this session was to allow some sort of processing, like in Ayurvedic medicine, which is my background. Like the process of detoxification is a process of Agni. Agni is the digestive fire, and Agni is really complex. Like, those of you who are maybe yoga teachers who've just dabbled in Ayurveda, like, you may have just learned that like Agni is Agni, but like the deeper you go into Agni, it's like, oh no, there's lots of different types. There's lots of different levels of Agni as a principle, this principle of like how we digest to evolve. In Western culture, there's more of a sense of cleanliness, of purification. It's a mythology more of purification, that you purify yourself And that's more like washing yourself, right? It's more of like the virgin, right? It's more of that. It's like returning to a saintly state. And it's just really different in Ayurveda. And I find Ayurveda super helpful. It's like you can actually digest a process with the light of your awareness. You can digest a process. And so I wanted to offer this just as a way for, us to all kind of be in that digestive process together, both as a community. I see a lot of familiar faces from over the years, and I really am so happy to see all of you. And I also just wanted to let people ask questions, and really like an anything goes TMI style. Like everything about this is so off the record. And I know there's a lot of curiosity. There's a lot of curiosity about my choices. The book is, I would say, borders on reckless, and that's sort of how I roll. Kari's good to see her. I was just talking to Kari, and there was a level for me in being able to write the book because of the business model that I grew and what we train in Wellness Pro Academy and what we tested for years in yoga health coaching, that I had created financial wealth and security that allowed me and does continue to allow me to publish books that do not need to be popular. And so my absolute devotion to truth, right? Regardless of whether it's going to get clicks or likes or whether it's going to get censored, right? As stuff has gotten censored on YouTube that I've put out, for me, could be less of a consideration than I feel like a lot of other wellness pros that have, honestly, quite a bit more wisdom than I do, in a different way. And that's something that I don't think any of us can really take for granted. It's like wellness pros often are in a place where they're just financially trying to make it. They're just trying to make it work. They're just trying to pay the bills. They're just trying to put their kids through college. They're just trying to, get the organic food on the table. And it's a little bit pricier. Right. And so there's something I believe in this story, having written on Inflamed and just done so much research about chronic inflammation and cancer before I even knew I had cancer, that allowed me to say it like it was, really without fear. Like there's like the book release day was so uneventful for me because it's like I had processed so much through writing. And so we can also talk a little bit about that, like writing as a healing process, memoir as a healing process, like writing our way through our healing. So really anything's game. So I'd love to see in the chat really any questions that you guys have and what you want me to do. If you want me to do more, it's like I have the book pulled up. If you want me to read any particular thing, I think I had set out a few. I don't know how, I've done some readings on the podcast too, so I don't know, like if it's repetitive. I can't imagine everyone's listening to the podcast. But would you like me to start with a little bit of reading? Does that sound like a good place to begin? Okay, cool. This feels really intimate to me. Like I've never done, like I actually, in like Audible, I don't often read my own books. And part of that is because by the time I've written a book, I'm usually on to something that is far more capturing my attention. I have insanely high quick start energy, and I'm an innovator and a futurist, so my awareness really lives pretty far out in the future. Okay, Robin, talk about your period of denial. Please do speak on the processing through writing. Okay, great. Yeah, and we can also talk about the whole process of the healing journey for healers as well. Yeah. Okay. So I think I'll just start with her altar because I feel like her altar says a lot of it. Okay. Her altar. She wants something from you, Cancer. She wants everything from you. Complete acquiescence of who you were. Complete willingness to strip yourself to the bone, offering each layer of self at her altar. She wants you to know who is in charge, and it's not you. She invites you to listen, to search, to act out what you failed to heed in your past. Get the memo this time. Take her seriously, or she may kill you. She teaches you the rules of her game. Keep your eyes wide open. Search for clues. Get fit as a fiddle, clean as a whistle, sharp as an axe. Shed culture completely. Culture led you to Cancer's kitchen. If you want to survive her, go primal. The game is the transformation from dukkha to sukha, dirty space to clean space, internally toxic to deeply cleansed, from a lower order to a higher dimension. The sooner you free yourself from the cloak of culture, the greater your chance of winning. And she is part of you. Cancer wants you to win. If you play her game consciously, she will give you the ride of your life and the playbook for the next dimension. Cancer demands a complete rebuild. She is taking you down to the studs, stripped to your core again and again until you get it or die. She wants you to see what rises from your ashes. She also wants you to see what rises, I have a typo, from your ashes. I don't know why that's in there twice. If you partner with her, she will guide you. She is not what she seems. If you listen, she will strip you clean of what is not acceptable at the next level of you. She is beautiful and skillful. If you engage her dance willingly, Cancer will digest your bullshit. She will lead you to the greatest ecstasy and ecstasy. She breaks the barriers of matter with vibration. She invites you to return to your primal self. Her teaching is primal medicine. You can love her for her power of transformation, or you can hate her, fight her, fear her, struggle against her. Either way, she might kill you. A war, Cancer is not. A friendship, a partnership, a game that requires you to show up like you've never shown up before. She will scare you to get your full attention. She is game on. She requires your best every day, or you will suffer. You can pile more layers of disconnect, toxicity, and bullshit on top of her. She will retaliate by weakening your power, your immunity, your resilience, and your soul. Surgery, scar tissue, radiation, chemo, and synthetic chemical medicines breed layers of disconnect on top of her. You will most likely survive, but you will always fear her. You could choose the path of unconsciousness. You will be given many chances to play the war victim. You will be pressured into choices that have long-term negative consequences and irreversible side effects. You'll need to go deep into the dark cave alone to slow down the emergency, to navigate from within. Cancer is a disease that requires the deepest of digestion. Cancer means you have missed dozens of wake-up calls. The time to pay attention is now and yesterday. Culture will suck you into the victim, the war, and your outdated personality with all its might. Culture will show up as your family, your doctors, and Google. Culture drives Cancer. She is misunderstood. Cancer. Perhaps intentionally, perhaps out of primal fear. She is the goddess of death and rebirth. Her game has rules. You may learn the hard way. I did. Now, I know her. I know her game, her rules. I respect her beauty. She intertwines all the realms of our human experience, from cultural to primal, from body to spirit, from emotional to relational, from fear to epiphany. She is the grand mistress of evolution. She is the ultimate healing mechanism, and for that, I love her. To hold her hand, you must let go of who you were. Offer your preferences as food at her altar. Then she will guide you, detox you. Then she will show you true nourishment. She will lead you to primal, to freedom you otherwise will never know. If you're playing the game with Cancer, she will show you the weapons for the game. She will teach you autonomy and intuition. If you follow intuition, she will give you a team of healers, of plant medicines, of tools to clear your bullshit. Leave behind everything that isn't working. leave behind people telling you what to do and how to do it. Your people will not want you to play her game. They fear her. That is part of the game. Cancer is a path to a higher life. She knows the way through. Listen with everything you've got, and she'll show you the way onto the game of your life. So I just want to pause and take questions on anything or comments or, whatever. Like we don't have to do this like audible. So if you guys want to unmute, I'm not going to we don't have to do raise hands. You can just ask questions or comment. Let's see. Elsa says, read half the book up to now. I'm really curious about how you took care of changing your mindset, letting go of this pathological independence. What practices helped you most to move through the mental and emotional side of healing? Did I do anything specific to his past thoughts and beliefs that may have been a source of the illness? I mean, the one word answer to that is entheogens. So the plant medicines, entheos, theos is God, like enthusiasm. So the plant medicines that are the entheogens it's a fairly broad category of the psychotropics that, one of the core mechanisms is ego dissolution, right? And so that, and my sense is there's zero research on, not zero, but there's close to zero research on entheogens and cancer. There is good research on entheogens in the gut-brain axis and the gut-brain microbiome. So what does ego dissolution have to do with changing mindset? There was a book Dr. Andreas Moritz wrote, which is Cancer is Not a Disease, It's a Healing Mechanism. And he died, because those of you who know me know that I will track down and interview the people that I find in the wellness industry, the best of the best are the most unknown doctors. They're not the ones with the flashy PR campaigns. They're not the ones that hit the New York Times bestseller list. To me, all that's pretty watered down. Not all of it, but a lot of it is pretty watered down. And I know a lot of you guys have seen amazing healers in little nooks and crannies. The best body work I ever had was on it was in this little tiny, it's not, to call it a town would be to aggrandize it, this little tiny village in Bali when Indy was almost 2. And he took my baby, and after he'd worked on me and my husband, and I'd never seen her hit a subtle body level of awareness after watching him work on her for 30 minutes. It was just oh, okay, right. There's healers, and then there's healers. So I think Andreas Moritz was one of them. He was the one who popularized the liver stone detox. How do you get biliary stones out of your liver and gallbladder? What we know about the liver gallbladder stones is that they are dysbiotic. We know cancer is dysbiosis with different microbiome signatures. What we know is that by 2030, that liver and gallbladder cancers will overtake the prostate, breast, and uterine cancers. So Andreas Moritz is really onto this stuff. And if I hadn't had him, I probably would have gotten sucked into having lymph nodes removed and a lot more trauma and drama, radiation, etc. Chemo, stuff that they want to do. If my dad hadn't already had cancer for 30 years and survived 4 cancers and found chemotherapy I'm having a brain fart moment, and having when you get the immunotherapy over chemotherapy. If my aunt hadn't died of chemotherapy 2 years ago, she didn't die of cancer, she died of chemo. So if I hadn't had all of these kind of experiences and influences, it may have been a lot harder for me to find my own path of going into the mind, going into what is this really? But it was the entheogens that gave me these experiences where you could, because the problem with cancer, I feel to such a huge degree is cultural fear. Right, Candace? See you vigorously nodding. Right, so if you can program fear, not just for the person that's diagnosed, but for everybody around them, like everyone who hears that word. Fear is a very effective control mechanism. And in college, I studied totalitarianism and fascism as part of studying international relations. So I understood these mechanisms. Like I understood from a systemic and political level how psychops works, how psychological operations are used to create a more governable people. You can get people to do things that they otherwise might not do, and that might override primal. Because I'd already written on Inflamed and Primal Habits before I was diagnosed, I had already processed a lot of how culture creates consumers and how consumers are easily programmed into what to consume. And then you create availability and lack of availability, scarcity. So I feel like I had like every fucking advantage you could have, right? Like I had grown up with a dad with cancer. I had been tested. Like I knew I had already done quite a bit of research. I'd written books. Like I had every advantage going in. And so I still got consumed by the fear. And that shocked me, and those of you who know me, like understand why that would shock me. Like I'm a very dominant person. I'm a very masculine personality, very driven, very successful, very independent, and all that. And it was so shocking to me that the fear could get to me. And I think that's really what motivated me to write the book, because it's like so many people are going to have cancer. And if we can understand more of what it is, if we can understand dysbiosis, if we can understand the role of liver and gallbladder stones that are dysbiotic, that breed cancer, like there's so much that if like we can understand the healing mechanisms, especially the ones like so many of them are so low cost and so free, right? So if we can really understand what that is, then like, because I had every advantage. Like I had an advantage of disposition, like personality type, and 20 some years of leading detoxes and experimenting with everything under the sun, right? And it wasn't like totally surprising because I had Lynch syndrome, So the entheogens are what could cut through the fear. And to me, when you have created a culture that is afraid of the category of drugs called entheogens, we had our big revival in the 50s. We had Timothy Leary at Harvard. We had studies, and then we had the absolute illegalization, including the illegalization of the studies of the entheogen category. So we took a awakening in culture that was part of a discovery that was in opposition to power, right? How do you get men to become soldiers and go to war, right? Die for their country, right? Rather than go through a personal awakening. And we understand the politics and the history of it. Part of the reason I feel like I had to publish Which is Cancer is to help people understand that they don't need to be afraid of the category of drugs called entheogens, and how the entheogens will break you free of cultural constraints that you don't know are controlling how you think, how you purchase, how you do what you do with your life.
Kate,
Yeah.
may I ask you something about that? I have not delved into, or maybe just skimmed the surface of entheogens. I don't have any judgment, but I've always come to myself like, is this what I need at this time? And I guess what I see just observing, it's like, you know how to go about it and to get like the right support. But then I think with anything, I've, people who, kind of went in without any sort of protection and without any intention have like totally floundered. So, and you do talk about that in your book, which I appreciate. Like, you need the intention, you need the integration. And I guess I just haven't really felt like, I have found.
Yeah. Setting and the studies from Johns Hopkins and University of Michigan, everything is, it's so cool. It's like everything's pointing back to why, like in Uninflamed and in, I have all my books here except for which is cancer. That one I only still have digitally. It's coming in the mail. But why in uninflamed and primal habits, trip? Why is trip a habit? Why is trip primal? And who here was a fan of the late Terence McKenna? Anyone? Yeah. So, and even Jordan Peterson, any Jordan Peterson listeners out there? Maybe a few here and there. Yeah. So Jordan Peterson was a clinical psychologist. He published over 200 studies at McGill University, which is where he did I believe, his graduate work and postgraduate work on alcoholism. And then he went and taught at Harvard, and then he went and taught at University of Toronto. So those of you who don't know his background, just know him as like maybe something more portrayed by the left as like a very controversial figure. He's actually just like a phenomenal clinical psychologist. And where the research seems to point, for those who, like myself, have more of like a more of a meta mindset, who think in terms of deep time and deep space, and that's part of, like, I am a systems thinker, and I think in terms of like not just what happened 10 years ago, but much more of like, where have we been in the last 30,000 years, 100,000 years? Where are we going in the next 100 years? Like, that's a bit of how my awareness works. So if we look at that perspective and we look at the history of entheogens and how they were used before agriculture. So when I talk about primal, I'm really talking about before agriculture. So what was the culture before agriculture? What was the culture before we started storing grain? The storage of grain changed a lot for humans. It changed. We stopped intermittent fasting. That was one of the big things that happened. When we stopped intermittent fasting 10,000 years ago, our brain size started to shrink. We had more aggregation of power. So then we have class stratification, we have caste systems and the like. So a lot changed for us. So with there's a decent amount of theory now to understand like the difference between what happened in the pre-Christian culture and in the Greco-Roman culture, that there's still entheogens, there's goddess worship, right? That's where we have worship of fertility, right? Whereas like in the Christian era, we have more of a masculine culture. We have the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. We have a virgin mother. We have a real shift in culture right there from earth consciousness. So now we have man over nature. We have destruction of nature. We have an othering. Those of you who work with Thomas Hübl, we have an othering of nature. Whereas before that, we have a you are nature, you are God, you are the creator. You don't need an intermediary between you and the divine. You are the divine. You have direct access to the divine. The ego dissolution component of entheogens gives you that experience when done with set and setting. So if we go back to pre-agriculture, and I feel like Terence McKenna really had his finger on the pulse with this, is like, how did humans evolve from monkeys? And what was the role of entheogens in that? Because we know that you can have increased visual acuity. We know it. You go into gamma brainwave states. It highlights different parts of the brain. The brain gets interconnected in different ways. So you have like massive brain growth with the entheogens. And his whole theory was like, basically, we were monkeys in trees. We had scarcity that drove us into the pasture lands. We were following cows, and where cows poop, mushrooms grow. And so we were microdosing. And then we had earth-based rituals, right? So everything was earth-based rituals before we have the rise of agriculture. So that rise of agriculture, you have to protect your store of grain. And so now you have much more like weaponry, right? Now you have the aggregation of wealth. And this to me is where, like, again, like primal, you start to see through the layers of culture. But then how are the entheogens used when it wasn't microdosing and it was all set and setting, right? Here's the intention. This is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it, right? And that's where you have like the rise of the shaman and a real sense of someone else protecting the space so that the person who's receiving the healing is in a protected space and then can really let go. So the rise of psychedelic psychotherapists is global. It's on the rise. Andrea Schumann, you guys can let her know I sent you at Micro Drops, MYCRO Drops. She has an Ayurvedic herbal company for microdosing. We have other, like in Club Thrive, I share other sources for those just in terms of like getting clean supplies, because that's really one of the big concerns. And I think we have a discount with her. I think it's Club Thrive 10. I can look it up. So I just ask around. You're in Colorado. I know people in the Denver area. Like, it's one of those things where it's like kind of word of mouth. But once you start asking around, you'll notice that like it's out there for sure. And I would recommend that. I would really recommend one-on-one with a psychedelic psychotherapist is really probably the best way to go, as opposed to like a group event. And I would also recommend microdosing as well. I was reading yesterday a bunch of like the aggregate research on microdosing, and it does have to do, like any medicine, like anyone who has taken healing into their own hands knows that dosage frequency. It's not just that you have the right medicine, right? It's like everything else. Like, what are you eating? What are you doing? How much are you taking? And all of that. Yeah.
Don't you think too, Cate? I just want to bring this in and then I'll be quiet so other people can ask stuff. But that we're being called at this time to, and maybe part of the shock that you experience and that I've experienced over the past like 2 years of just getting this sickness that, even though I never chose like an injection, I've gotten very sick with long symptoms.
Mm.
I am like realizing that we have to start relating to ourselves as really not just intellectually, but as an energy body to overcome, because otherwise we're just being bombarded, like you can't avoid the world, but
Yeah.
like you said in your book, you had all this happen after you flew. And that's when like, I was sick.
Yeah.
And, there's, and I think that's part of the built-in, I mean, just by nature of it, the built-in fear, because, and I've had that, it's like, God, I don't want to go be around a lot of people. But I've also, in my internal work, it's been like, I can get through my weird symptoms. I never got diagnosis, but I mean,
Yeah.
I had a lymph node, like a golf ball on my right where the main one drains, and I just kept, doing my stuff and it went away. But, it's, I just feel like.
Yeah. I'll read this epigraph because I feel like innate immune suppression by SARS-CoV-2 mRNA vaccinations. I'll read, this is in the very beginning because it is important to understand this. And this is something I can read on those who don't know the bit of the story, the plain and the bleeding. I'll read this and then I'll read the plain and the bleeding. Thank you, Candace, for the lead-in. Okay, so Stephanie Seneff, this is kind of wild. Like, again, like I kind of had every advantage. I interviewed Dr. Stephanie Seneff, who wrote Toxic Legacy. She was the research scientist that was responsible for producing the science that they used in the court cases against Monsanto for class action suits with the glyphosates. And I interviewed her on Toxic Legacy because there was a lot of questions coming up in the Club Thrive community around glyphosates and like what exactly were they doing at the cellular and the subcellular level. Okay, so the utilization of mRNA vaccines in the context of infectious disease has no precedent. The many alterations in the vaccine mRNA hide the mRNA from cellular defenses and promote a longer biological half-life and high production of spike protein. In this paper, we present evidence that vaccination induces a profound impairment in type 1 interferon signaling, which has diverse adverse consequences to human health. Immune cells that have taken up the vaccine nanoparticles release into circulation large number of exosomes containing spike protein along with critical microRNAs that induce a signaling response in recipient cells at distant sites. We also identify potential profound disturbances in regulatory control of protein synthesis and cancer surveillance. These disturbances potentially have a causal link to neurodegenerative disease, myocarditis, immune thrombocytopenia, Bell's palsy, liver disease, impaired adaptive immunity, which is basically going to trigger all sorts of autoimmune disease, impaired DNA damage response, and tumorigenesis. So that was Stephanie's next line of work after taking down Monsanto. She started studying the innate immune suppression by SARS-CoV-2. I was never vaccinated. I have been muscle tested by a number of people, by a number of doctors. Those of you who believe in muscle testing, those of you don't, it is what it is. That I have like all the vaccines and most of the boosters in my physiology. And for those who don't know this story, I can read a little bit about the plane. Okay, this is end of May 2022. I feel good boarding the plane from Newark to Lisbon. My normal modus operandi lies somewhere around invincible. Yet I'm more receptive since the MDMA experience. I'd had in the previous month an MDMA psychedelic therapy session one-on-one, and it released a lot of goddess consciousness. So it's way more open in my divine feminine getting on the plane. The air on the plane is wrong. It's wrong. I don't want to breathe. I don't know what's in the air. I'm feeling invaded. I'm not feeling invincible. I wonder, why does it feel toxic? Maybe it's from the vaccine boosters oozing out of people's airways. Just FYI, like this was Newark to Lisbon. So like the New Yorkers, right, who'd been like super pent up for years now, are like finally getting to go to Europe. It's only a 6-hour flight from New York to Lisbon, but it is a 6-hour flight. And I didn't have any awareness. I mean, I had read a few things about vaccine shedding at that point, but I wasn't worried. And I'm not, for those of you who know me, I'm not paranoid. Like I'm so grounded and I have a lot of ojas, so that I'm not like a paranoid person, and I'm not looking for things, but I was just like, this is interesting. Maybe it's from the vaccine boosters oozing out of people's airways. I recall the casual conversation after my interview with Dr. Stephanie Seneff last week. After her work on the effects of glyphosates, won court cases against Monsanto and then Bayer, she turned to research on mRNA vaccine shedding. I'm on a plane with hundreds of vaxxed and boosted New Yorkers. I'm also not like ultra pure, even though I'm really into, detoxing and fast mimicking diet and stuff like that. Like I've always been someone that's very of the world, that's very rebellious, that's very like, I'm not like an ultra pristine, my body is my temple. Like I have, enough of my body as my temple from 20 years in yoga and Ayurveda and meditation and all that, or 30 years. But it's not like I'm MO. Like my MO is like, I'm a fucking kick-ass warrior. So I'm not, you know what I mean? Like I'm not looking for reasons, but that's just how it felt. Okay, the bleeding, June 2022. Some days after the plane lands, the bleeding starts. We're in Porto, my daughter and I break out in a rash, and it spreads and spreads and spreads. I itch, I bleed. Indy is petrified by my skin. It looks like chickenpox. I'm in a massive inflammatory response. But why? We're in the park in Jerez. I rinse my underwear in the sink at the hostel after another day of hiking and bleeding in the magical rock forest. Why are you still bleeding? She asks. I don't know. I respond, I wish it would stop, she says. I buy more tampons. A week of bleeding turns into 2. Something is wrong. We're back in Lisbon. My members fly in from Europe. We workshop. I run to the bathroom and lose big handfuls of bloody clots. I've never seen such blood. I tell the witches who have come to the workshop with me. They say they are seeing a lot of clotted bleeding since the clot shot. Despite the bleeding, I feel good, clear, slender. The rash subsides. I am weakening, curious about not needing so much mass. So what happened in the next few, in the few months, and then as I went back and did a light edit of the book, is like a lot of research started disappearing from the internet on vaccine shedding. And a lot of the research started disappearing about the side effects of the vaccines and blood clotting and the side effects of the virus. I did have another interview with Stephanie right after surgery, and she had devoted the last at that point, like the last 12 months of her work to the vaccine injury database. It's a global database that has, and the number of hoops a doctor has to go through to report vaccine injury is insane. She's like, it's so hard for them to report. But the ones who do report, that was the body of research that she was looking at that point. She had been studying vaccine shedding. Like, it's so hard to find that information right now, but there is a little bit of it kind of coming back. I think I do put the interview with Elon and the BBC, Elon Musk and the BBC, that was done just a couple months ago, about how the BBC changed its editorial policy to basically misreport information. So in many ways, again, like, I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist, like, but that's where this path led for me. And that's, I think, in part why publishing this book, I feel like this book is for people. It is for the healers, probably more than anything, because they're going to see the vaccine injury more than anyone else. Right. And I know this because when I was first working as an Ayurvedic medicine practitioner, I started to see just like the long haul effects of postpartum issues, of like women trying to get their body back too soon and go back to work too soon and try to be all like very affected by culture and how to be a mom in modern culture that was really antithetical to primal wisdom. Right. So I'd already seen this as was a pattern in my career where I'd see effects like 3 years later, like women on Synthroid. Like when you've seen the 5th mom on Synthroid that month, you're like, what the fuck is up with motherhood? Like, and I had a background in Ayurvedic medicine, and I had also become a doula, a birth doula. And I had also, spent quite a bit of time interviewing the late Isha Oakes, who had a really strong Ayurvedic postpartum program. She was trying to bring back Ayurvedic postpartum into modern culture and repair that damage. So I knew that you might not see things for first, 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, 3 years. And then it's hard to go back. It's hard to then find like what started this, like what actually pushed someone over the edge. So I really do appreciate your question, Candace, of like, how much does the mRNA technology, how much will we see more, whether it's heart attacks, whether it's cancer, et cetera, and how many more vaccines will be invented that will be more or less culturally enforced, right? So enforced in order to keep your job, in order to get a passport, in order to have basic liberties. And that is, I think, one of the bigger questions. And I know from having led a community for a long time that like this is really hard for certain people to hear. Like if you notice, like you just want to tune out and turn it off because you don't want to live in a universe where this is possible, because that's not the world you believe in. Like, I so get it. But when you do see people that do have a really strong background in health, that have all of the circadian rhythm habits, the anti-inflammatory habits that are like pretty fucking dialed in, and all of a sudden they have a really scary diagnosis, it is important that you do reference, I think, this conversation in your mind. Because that's what the healers, that's what I call them, the witches. And these are often women who've transcended culture. They've gone so deep into their own healing journey that they're not really touched by culture. They're not afraid of censorship. They're not afraid of the dark side. They're not afraid of death. They're not afraid of the depth journey. They're not afraid of ego dissolution. They're not afraid of falling apart, and they can escort other people through the process of falling apart. Because when you can really fall apart, that's when you find truth, and that's when you reinvent. Yeah.
Kate. Well, could you say that again?
Sure. Well, tell me more. What do you want to hear more about, Susie?
Wait, just that that line. When you really fall apart, that's when you can reinvent. How did you say that?
Yeah. It's the depth journey. So in Club Thrive, it's the depth journey. So Club Thrive, we have 3 major sets of people. We have the biohackers that are just like, what are they doing next? Like, what are the primal habits? I want them, and I want life design strategy. I want to live my unique life as a creator. I want to break out of, sort of my own whirlwind of whatever that is, and really live at a higher order. And then we have the, people with cancer, people with scary diagnosis, people with autoimmune diagnosis, people that are like, I want to be around other people that can understand the depth journey. So the depth journey, there's the growth journey, and that's the hero's journey. The depth journey is the heroine's journey. So if we look in mythology, the depth journey, and I love mythology because it transcends culture. So when you see the same story told on different sides of the world, and when you've already had the dream, and this is so beautifully taught by Jordan Peterson in some of his biblical lectures in Toronto, maybe dated, I don't know, a couple of years ago. And he talks about like we dream it before we name it. Like, again, you have to understand this is one of the global, like whether you like his politics or not, leave that aside. This is like one of the leading clinical psychologists in the world today. He really is. He's really, he's a mensch. Like he's just a higher order thinker. And he's talking about like, we dream it. We dream the myths. We dream the stories. We dream the archetypes before we act them out. And then we act them out in real life. So the goddess journey is the depth journey. It's the journey to hell and back. And many of you know the Greek myth, the story, which there's a prior myth, a Sumerian myth that this comes out of. So the story of Demeter and her and her daughter, Persephone. Often you'll remember like the pomegranate seeds are the symbol of Persephone's, her fertility. So it goes something like this. Zeus, Hades makes a pact with Zeus that he can abduct Persephone. Persephone is the virginal daughter of Demeter. Demeter is the goddess of heaven, goddess of the crops, goddess of the sun. Right. So anything grown, this is the harvest. This is an agrarian culture myth, right? Goddess of the harvest. It comes from a Sumerian myth. So those of you who know Mesopotamian mythology, this is the same story as the story of 3,000 years earlier of Inanna, the queen of heaven, the queen of the crops, and her sister, not her daughter this time, but her sister, Ereshkigal, who's the queen of hell. Hell is somewhere in the center of the earth. Earth is grounded. Heaven is lofty. Heaven is spirit. Earth is body. So the deeper you go into your cellular matrix, that's traversing into earth. That's where hell is. Hell is down, it's in, and it's dark, and it's in the intuitive mind because you can't see. So there's also stories that come out of Mesopotamian mythology of where the god goes down, he loses an eye. So now he only has one eye. So the single-eyed god is the male version of the god who's gone to hell. So he can only see with his third eye. And this is so important to understand. Right. And so if you don't have a community that gets it to heal, you're going to be pulled into externalities. You're going to be pulled back into the surface, pulled to the surface, pulled to the light, pulled to here's the supplement, pulled to here's the next therapy, pulled to this. And it's all distraction. It's all out there. It's all saying you don't have what you need within you. Horus, that's the one I got. I just want to quickly answer Nicole's question. So why do I think I got cancer? I believed, so because I was super high genetic risk, right? I had a 70% chance, 70% chance of Lynch syndrome, of uterine cancer before I was 50 years old. It was the vaccine shedding. It was the mRNA technology. That whole part that I read with Stephanie, how it goes to the mRNA, then goes to a distant location. It just got picked up in my uterus, and that's why I started bleeding a week later. When they analyzed the tumor was 3 months old. It dated exactly back to the plane ride. So again, you guys, like, I'm not a fucking conspiracy theorist. Like, I'm not like, I wasn't looking for this. It's like Kari, when we were talking earlier, I was like, I wasn't looking for like urine therapy to overtake like Body Thrive. Like I wasn't looking for these things, but I am a true walker of the truth. And that's why people come into Club Thrive, is they're just like so much more interested in like non-consumer wisdom, right? Like, what is that experience like? The rash was the big clue in retrospect. Right? Because I really felt fucking amazing going. Like so strong. I was skiing up, like my routine the 2 months before was to literally like leave my house before dawn, with my dog, ski up the mountain, like ski up 2,000 foot vertical and ski back down. It was like about a 75 to 90-minute routine my dog had every day. Ultra fit, intermittent fasting, cryotherapy about daily. I had the anti-inflammatory habits, and I'm those who know me, like I'm buff, like I have a 6-pack, like I'm a very strong physical human being. And when you read the studies on cancer and epigenetics, it's like the epigenetic environment is what determines cancer. So it's the environment around your genetics that determines cancer or not. And my epigenetic environment was pretty fucking bomber, right? But I had an MDMA session that really opened me to divine feminine, opened my womb. So it was in a highly, highly receptive state, highly vulnerable, highly open, intuiting from your womb. Like those of you who've experienced that kind of awareness in your physiology, where you're really in sync with living from the womb power. That's how I got on that airplane. Open. Right? And then the mRNA vaccine was like, went straight in, changed the epigenetic environment, created clotting, created dysbiosis, changed the way that those cells were able to function in my body systemically. So then what did my body do? Super brilliant response, creates a massive inflammatory response. I look like I have the chicken pox. I itch like fuck for like 10 days, like head to toe, everything. It's like, I'm like, what? And you guys, I am a healer. Like I know herbology, I know Ayurvedic pathogenesis. Like there's a lot that I know. I know detox, I know panchakarma. There's a lot that I know. And I'm just, in Ayurvedic medicine, you look back, you look back, you look back. And I'm like, what changed? And not much had changed. Like my body's having a triggered response. And this is from an exogenous source. So something from the outside came in and my body was having this insane response. And then as the bleeding started, the rash subsided. And in my Ayurvedic pathogenesis, those of you who know Ayurvedic pathogenesis knows that now you're going from spread to localization. And then I was like, fuck. Because that means you've gone from a quantitative doshic imbalance to a qualitative cellular systemic, an imbalance in a particular system, which means that it's going to be much harder to cure. You just went from easy to cure to hard to cure. It's like a 3rd to 4th step. It's really means like now you're in trouble. And I'm like, but I'm me, So I'm going to do all the things that I know to do. And I just bled and bled and bled and bled. So yeah, the MDMA did it make me more susceptible? Like I was very open in a highly receptive state. So yes. And did it help cure me? Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. The MDMA didn't have anything to do with the cancer. It was the mRNA vaccine shedding that I was exposed to. It was picking up an exogenous, like those of you who've ever had an allergic response, like maybe poison oak, poison ivy, you know what I mean? Like where all of a sudden you've got like a rash spreading everywhere from something that, it wasn't like you did it on the inside. It wasn't a genetic, it wasn't caused by your genes. It was caused by something from the outside touching your body, a volatile oil from a plant. This was like that. Okay, so back to the goddess and descent to the goddess and that part that Susie asked about, the breakdown before the breakthrough. So in the story of it's to me so important to understand in terms of mindset and breakdown before the breakthrough. Hades makes the deal with Zeus. He gets to take Persephone against her will, right? And so Persephone goes through a period where she's disoriented and afraid because she's now below the surface. Now she's in hell. She's down for 6 months. By the time, and this is the critical part that's misunderstood, really misunderstood. By the time she goes back, because there's all this fucking wheeling and dealing between Demeter and Zeus, because now you have winter, you have nothing growing, and nothing is going to grow unless Demeter can smile. And she cannot smile while her daughter is in hell. And she's assuming the worst, right? What happens though, and it's the same story with Ereshkigal and her husband, who's king of hell, is they fall in love. This is so hard to understand. And this is what keeps women from their power, is if you're not willing to dissolve, if you're not willing to let everything come undone, and if you don't have a safe space for that to happen. And so what we have to understand is that Hades provided a safe space for Persephone to understand her own intuition, to see where there is no light, to know herself and to mature from virgin to witch. So she maturates, comes back. Demeter's like, thank gosh you're here. And she's like, I miss my man, which is the principle of the masculine, right? It's the principle of truth. So her intuition, the feminine, marries truth. Where? Not above the surface. So she's like, Mom, I'm going back. Right? And that's the story of winter. Go back 3,000 years. Ereshkigal, who is her soulmate, is the king of hell. She's the queen of hell. Her sister's the queen of heaven. Her name's Inanna. Ereshkigal loses her soulmate, king of hell, divine masculine, right? In the dark side of the divine masculine. This is not showy. This is a different type of a god. This is not a power-hungry god. The king of hell is not a power-hungry god. The king of hell protects the divine feminine intuition. That's the job. That's the power of earth wisdom. He's the protector of that. He's the protector of the divine feminine when it can come undone. And he's willing to lose his eye. He's willing to lose his sight. And the king of hell, this is really important to know, does not leave. He stays. She goes. The queen goes. So Inanna's sister dies. She's the queen of hell. Her name's Ereshkigal. Inanna shows her ego. Ereshkigal impales her through the third chakra and leaves her to die because she showed up inappropriately on her depth journey. What does that mean? It means you can't keep your ego. You can't keep the known. You can't keep control. And so that's why, in answer to Susie's question, that you have to be able to become completely undone. And this is why in Wellness Pro Academy, we coach to the club model. Because if you don't have a club, if you don't create a container that can transcend time, meaning people don't get kicked out, there's no course, there's no graduation ceremony, there's just renewal. If we don't have a business structure that enables a safe enough place, grounded in habits for people to come undone, we're in transactional, which means we're playing above the surface, which means it's all therapies and fixes and it's all these things above the surface because we haven't gone into a transformational business model. And to me, this is so, so, so important because this is really this is the archetype. This is the story. It's like you have, as a wellness pro, and I know half of you on here, if not more, are wellness pros. If you don't have the structure, that's the divine masculine that can be in hell and stay there. And stay there. For what? For other people to show up with their ego, scared, just wanting to go back to heaven. So Inanna is like, what the fuck? I don't want to go mourn my sister, my brother-in-law. I don't want to go to hell to mourn my brother-in-law. Like, she's queen of heaven. She's got all the jewelry. She has all the robes. She has the crown. She has the throne. Like in the story, they really go through like all the things. She has all the externalities. She has ego. She has status. All Inanna wants to do in the first half of the story is return to yourself. If you know anyone with cancer, anyone with a severe diagnosis, all they want is to go back to how it was. That's all they want. They want to go back to normal. But those of you who are healers know that like there is no way back to normal. Normal is the problem. It was their ego. I missed that, Tiffany. Go ahead.
No, I'm just so passionate about what you're saying. I'm like 100%.
100%. Yeah. Thank you. Love, Chica. You know, I knew this. I was teaching this. And I had to know it. It's the same thing. Like Inanna knew. Like she knew why Ereshkigal was in hell. She knew her sister. Her sister is the witch, right? So she's the virgin. And she loved her sister. And she knew it intellectually. And that's how I knew it. You know, I'm super fucking smart, a high intellectual processor, really quick study. Like I could teach this. And people would follow me and read my books and stuff because they were connected to it. But there's nothing like when you fall in love with hell, like when you become Persephone and you're no longer the virgin, right? And you don't care. about status, and you don't care about the robes and the jewels and the throne. You just are so much more interested in reality. So that's what the healer witch represents, and her divine dark partner, Hades, or Ereshkigal Gil's partner, I can't remember his name, is you can hold this, I call it holding the steady. You can hold the steady for other people to go on a depth path. You can hold the steady for all the fear in the world. Like, you can be that grounded. That's what hell is. It's you're that grounded that you can handle other people's fear of death with both eyes open. You can see all the horror and the tragedy, and at this point, the greed. There's so much greed controlling culture right now. It's so unprecedented. We're willing to poison our children, right? Unprecedented. Unprecedented. We're willing to sacrifice our genetic code for profit. Unprecedented. This is now. So those of you who are like called to a much higher order, Inanna goes back to heaven, right? But now she knows heaven on earth. Every 6 months, she makes a deal. Every 6 months, she'll return to hell. Persephone makes a deal with her mother. Every 6 months, she'll return to the light. But her love is in the dark. Her love is in the root, the core of the earth, grounded in the genetic code. Yeah, anyone can say anything. I feel like I've gone on and on.
I just want to say, Cate, that what you're saying, you've been. I mean, one of the greatest lessons I think I've ever learned is in one of your workshops where you taught about the spiral effect and when you tilted over horizontally. And this was hard for me, but the deeper I went, the higher I climbed.
Yeah.
And these last 2 years have probably been the darkest of my life, but they've been the most impactful. And it wasn't until I just said, fuck it, and I surrendered and I just let go of all the reins. And it's not that when you get into Ayurvedic medicine or a practitioner that you can overcome anything. It's that you learn that you need to befriend. Well, from what I've learned from you and other teachers, like, we need to befriend the shit because the shit is our greatest teacher. And if we don't befriend it and digest it with the Agni that is everything, then, I mean, we lose the opportunity, because every dis-ease is an opportunity to evolve. And I'm so grateful that you have always taught this and you've been so real, because everything you're saying about befriending it, you've taught it, and you've been one of my greatest teachers. So I honor you.
Thank you, Tiffany. It means a lot. All of you, I know, I feel it. And so many of you are called to do this for others. I just can't emphasize or like underline that enough. Like that is the calling of the healer.
Okay.
Yeah, Erica, go ahead.
This is Erica from Mexico. So thank you for this call. I just wanted to know if this could be. I know this is all about scary diagnosis, and this seems very kind of weird for me that this came in this time, as I have a sister that was just diagnosed with kidney dysfunction, and she's 33, and she was diagnosed at a point where she's severely affected, but it's still like 11-12% of the kidney function. So the process has been kind of similar, like you said, very difficult, very scary for her. Me, I'm her older sister. I started even feeling like I was the one that was sick too. But thankfully, since I followed you for some years and do some research on this healing, currently doing the Wild Habit challenge with you, the Primal Habits. We were kind of open the eyes. Like in 3 days, they were maybe going to tell her she has no there's no cure and we need to do dialysis, or I don't know how you say that in English.
Yeah, dialysis.
And, you go through all the medical procedures. She was very sick. She was bleeding a lot. So thankfully, I know a person that helps like with this naturist way of eating and has helped a lot of people. But he told me just before she goes into those treatments, right? So we had like 2 days for that. And I just told her, hold on. We know the specialists will be very dramatic. They will tell you need transplant, you will die, everything. And I know you're scary. We just got to go through this and just be patient, and think on the decision. So thankfully, she didn't go through all that. And she has been 6 months into the eating better. Still, all the things that you're talking about emotionally, socially, etc. But she has been recovering her function, which is like nonsense for the doctors. And they said, okay, this is just giving you time before the knee transplant, right? But I don't know if you think this is similar to any diagnosis like cancer, but this kidney dysfunction is like the same, right? There is no coming back from that, but only the transplant or living to. Thankfully, our nephrologist, he's very open-minded, and he didn't want to go through everything immediately. He just said that's the next step, but let's try to keep your kidney, your original kidney.
Yeah.
But what is calling my attention is that the reason why she found this is because she has been bleeding like for maybe 4 to 5 months, like if she was menstruating. And up to now, maybe it will be almost a year, the gynecologist and even with some shots and that, they haven't been able to stop the bleeding. It's something on her uterus. It is very, very low now, but that's why she was obviously anemic. And that's what led her to everything, right? She had two blood transfusions immediately. She was extremely sick. I don't know why she was holding that situation, but she got to the low point. I am the one trying to support her, the only one maybe because everybody wanted to go through the medical thing, but I am scared too, as you said. So I invited her to this call, but she doesn't speak a lot of English and she's still going through a lot. But I was kind of resonating with you because I was also scared and just thinking, is this the right way? And we did get the flu shots, everybody, the pressure and everything. And I just wanted to tell you, thank you. This is coming in a great time. I am asking her to have a consultation. But also, do you think the bleeding could be any type of bleeding? Like she maybe for a year? Or this is due to the kidney dysfunction? So that's what they say.
I always, want to know what came first, like what came before. That's helped me so much. Like that story I was telling about postpartum, like I would see women that their immune system was falling apart. They may or may not have had an autoimmune diagnosis by then. And thank goodness for my training. I had good training, and it was just go back to what happened when things started to fall apart, and then go back and just keep going back. And it was interesting. I was in Ben Hardy's Rapid Transformation program, based on his book with Dan Sullivan, 10X is easier than 2X. And Ben's process that he writes about, that he really got from Dan Sullivan, who's really one of the best entrepreneur coaches globally, has one of the biggest coaching organizations. As strategic coach, Dan created this process where you really go back to go forward. And I was like, oh, that's so fascinating. It's how they're coaching growth. Like the leading entrepreneurs, like the best business people in the world, right? It's how they're coaching growth. It's like, go back to go forward. And then if we look at the Ayurvedic system, the kosha system, where you have the bliss body, the intuitive body, the mind body, the energy body, the physical body, and we have the sheath, all those sheaths covering consciousness, like inviolable on immortal consciousness, right? We have these levels and layers. So it's like we go back and then we tell the story from each of the koshas to have some understanding of like what is driving the imbalance. And for some of us, it is going to be exogenous. That's really what Stephanie helped me learn, Dr. Sanef, because like my programming was so much from Ayurveda. Is Ayurveda precedes chemicals. So Ayurvedic theory was before the advent of chemicals and vaccines. And we have to understand that. But my programming was so like, it's on me, right? Instead of like, oh no, like I'm picking up exogenous technology, whether that's glyphosates in food or whether that's mRNA vaccines from someone coughing on an airplane next to me. And that really helped me change or update a little bit of like, what does it mean to be a healer right now in this process of going back? Like what are the exposures? And then what can we do? So if we just look at, and there's no cut and dried answers, you guys, like I'm not anti-allopathic at all. I'm like for everything, like really, like for all the things. I love the Ayurvedic myth of the 100 graduates of their Ayurvedic education. And, you know, the guy running the school, the Ayurvedic University 2,000 years ago, or however old the story is, I'm guessing it's way older than that, is like, go find a plant that's not a medicine, you know? So the 100 graduates, those of you I know have heard the story, but it's worth thinking about. So the 100 graduates go out into the hills and the forest and the rivers and the deltas, and, you know, they slowly start trickling back. You know, here's a plant that's not a medicine. Here's a plant that's not a medicine. After something like 30, 40 days, my guess it's 40 days in the desert, the last student comes back and it's just like, I couldn't find one. Right? And like, that's the moral of the story. That's the one who graduated. Right? So I don't know. I don't know what she needs, but I know that if you hold space and you hold your own fear, because the fear is not going to go away. It's like, it's the nervous system. It's your survival. It's your reptilian brain. It's healthy and it's functional. It's not, fear is not part of the dysfunction. It's part of the function. It's all functional. Like the ego is also super functional. And just to go back, I love Susie's question about like the breakdown. You have to dissolve the ego, but then you rebuild it. Then Inanna goes back to heaven. Then Persephone goes back and there's crops again because her mother's happy. There's the return, and the return is the growth path. And this is the path of reinvention. This is what we teach in Club Thrive, is it's like we teach identity evolution, because then when you've been in the dark for long enough and gotten the messages and gotten the like, okay, this is truth. This is wisdom. This is my higher order, which means for many of you, it means you have to disregard culture at a whole other level. Like there has to be certain things where you're just like, that's really not for me. And sometimes it's these people, like I had very intense conversations. You can read about them in Witches Cancer Journal. You know, I had intense conversations with my family of origin members, where it's like, I cannot and with my husband and with my daughter, like everyone gets to go to hell with you, and that you're willing to be there for your sister no matter what she chooses and no matter what comes up, and that you're willing to hold that space in the dark of the night and let her know that you're there. Like that's so much of it. And then not needing her to make certain choices for you is also a huge part of it. Like in Club Thrive, like one of the things that I keep coming back to is like letting people have their own unwinding. Like letting people find their own intuitive way. Right? Like being the one that is okay with the unknown, is okay with the fear, is okay with the myriad of all these choices that are happening up on the surface. Allowing for the coolest, newest, innovative drugs. We're going to see a whole new range of drugs that's really working with epigenetics and dysbiosis in such a beautiful way, with cancer and with other severe autoimmune, chronic disease, chronic organ disease, like kidney disease.
That's what I told her, and thank you. I had to step back and kind of go back to me and my nervous system and understand that I was not living what she's living, and understand this is just try to meditate again and again and say this is a lesson for her and for everybody, but she's gonna grow she's changing habits, of course, but she needs to do some other stuff. I'm trying to be just here, just watching, and if she needs help and she asks me, I will do it. But that's why I'm trying to learn more. But it has been like that for many years. I think she had some signs that she didn't listen, maybe for 10 years. So I was also very frustrated, right? But again, I came back and said, this is her life. This was her decision. And as difficult as it is.
That's it. I mean, and that for many of you as healers, when you have a way that you want your clients or patients to work, and it's to me, it's so much more about providing the safe space for them to be able to come undone. Like, allowing people to come undone. Like, to me, that's really what, back to the entheogens, that's really what the role of the sitter. And that's why a trip with a sitter is different than without the sitter. Same space, same intention, right? Same space, same intention, same drug, different level of depth journey. And as healers, we use psychotropics all the time. Many of you teach meditation. Many of you teach self-massage. Many of you teach yoga or Tai Chi or other energy medicines. Those are all psychotropics. Many of you lead retreats where people can really come undone. And the more you create, like in Wellness Pro Academy, the ground rules are like, the reason we have those ground rules is we know that creates the setting, right? Ground rules are really important for clubs, because you create a setting in which people can come undone, and you create a culture in which it's okay to come undone. It's okay to not know who you are. You don't need to show up with your robes and your jewelry, right? You don't need to show anyone how they want you to be. You can just be you, right? And in that transparency, people can find their own. I find it started to become magnetic. I would describe the energy as magnetic. How the healers just get drawn to the person. Like, the person can then find their medicines. They can find their healers. They can find, because they're able to not be from their past egoic knowing, and they're able to be so deep in the unknown that they're able to sense differently who is their medicine. They are their first and foremost medicine. I am my medicine, right? That's the mantra. It's also urine therapy, right? I am my medicine. My body makes my medicine. Such a powerful teaching that we received in Body Thrive, and then had to totally pivot into Club Thrive when we went primal. So I just want to say, like, if anyone knows someone that should be in Club Thrive or Wellness Pro Academy, if you guys want to talk directly with me, Jane's going to open some space. I know, Jane, you're here. You can just put a message in the chat, and she'll find you and set up a time for us to talk. We're finding a lot of members coming back that were in yoga health coaching, and we're in Body Thrive now, into Club Thrive and Wellness Pro Academy. Also, if you have people with scary diagnosis that should talk to me, we can make room for that too. What I have landed on, just in terms of my 30 plus year search for truth, is it is the habits before agriculture. It is the habits that drove human evolution. It's the habits that drove our evolution as a species, are the habits that heal us. And they are extremely countercultural, right? Like, of course they are. Of course they are. Because it's culture that has gotten us in, I hate to say the numbers now, but we're somewhere around an 80% chronic disease state right now in the United States. It's really high. 4 out of 5, it's really high. And that can't happen unless the habits are cultural. It just can't happen. So when we undo that, the good news is the primal habits are free, and it just gets better year over year. And we have a lot of stories and a lot of data on that now. Yeah. So I just want to, in closing, thank you all. Thank you for showing up today. Thank you for your deep listening. It really built a container for this to happen. And I just want to invite you all on whatever depth journey you're on, and to really go there, because the deeper you go and the more you shift from innocent, virgin, trusting culture to like witch who understands the mystery, You are what culture needs. You are the medicine. And so people will show up who are just drawn to being around you, and just they don't even know what they're getting. They're borrowing. And Kari reminds me before we were talking about, like, they're borrowing from your subtle nervous system. Because if you're willing to go to hell and be in hell with your sister, or be in hell with your neighbor, or be in hell with yourself, right, and be in hell with your own fear, it becomes a magnetic draw. It is the Earth's magnetism, right? So your nervous system, what in Ayurveda, this is, you could say it's at the level of the Manomaya Kosha or the Mahavahashrota. Like, you're literally attuning the Maja Dhatu. These are some fancy words that just basically say that you're attuning your nervous system back into primal, back into synchronization with the magnetic pull of the earth. And when that happens, you get ojas, you get immunity, you get resilience. So other people will need to borrow on your resilience. But the good news is that you know the endless supply. So then other people can borrow and borrow and borrow and borrow until they become self-regulated. And that really is to me, that is, I know you're all wounded healers. And that's so, so, so important to be that. And not to be ashamed at all of your own illnesses and sicknesses and invincibilities. That's what brings you into hell. That's what brings you into who you really are and into your resilience. Then when you emerge, you can choose who to be. And I just want to say in closing, like, that's been one of the biggest challenges for me, is when then there's infinite choice. There's an infinite amount of jewels and an infinite amount of robes. And it's like, what do I really want to be next? Because there's so much increased capacity, right? And capability and time and space, right? Because now you're accessing the timeless and that which is beyond, and a sense of immortality, because now you're not afraid of death. And that just changes everything. It changes then how to handle other people's fear. And the call to leadership is so loud, it hurts the ears. Everyone around you is crying for your leadership. And that's why we have Club Hero and Wellness Pro Academy. It's just like, I hear you, I know. Here's the structures and the tools and the community that can help you grow. Yeah, the pomegranate seeds. Yeah. That's awesome, Kathleen. Theralogic, anti-cancer. Yeah, pomegranate. Amazing. All right. I love you all. I am so glad you came. And yeah, get on my calendar and we'll talk. Namaste.